This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by the Virginia Education Association. An investment in teachers today will pay dividends tomorrow. Dignity Memorial. The Dignity Network provides professional and compassionate funeral, memorial, cremation, and cemetery services throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. Virginia Hospital and Healthcare Association for jobs, the economy, and public health, committed to advancing health and economic opportunity for all Virginians. Virginia Tourism Corporation, promoting why Virginia is for lovers, lovers of wine and craft beers, the outdoors, beaches, history, music, and more. Fall in love with Virginia at virginia.org. Additional support provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.
Welcome to This Week in Richmond, and a very special welcome back here at holiday season, Secretary Todd Haymore, Commerce and Trade. Prior to that, the second person named to be Secretary of Agriculture and Forestry. And we've had conversations before, and we're having this one as the time for your secretariat is winding down. So we're interested in some of your reflections about all those trade missions, and then your comments about what you see lying ahead. What's the status snapshot of how things are going in economic development now, and what you see even as you make your exit of choice, of what really is lying ahead.
David, thank you. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and I appreciate the opportunity, particularly as we're now in the last 30 days of the administration, and all the successes that we've had in economic development in the McAuliffe administration, still moving ahead, full speed.
That's right, still have some more before the 13th.
Exactly. The governor always says we can sleep when we're dead, and that means getting as many of these deals that we have in the pipeline done. But it's been an incredible almost 11-year run in state government, working for Governor Kane, Governor McDonnell, and now Governor McAuliffe in a variety of positions, and all really focusing on economic development, job creation, global commerce. And I'm proud to have served those three gentlemen and the citizens of Virginia. And I think we've made a difference, certainly coming in about a decade or so ago with the beginning of the recession under Governor Kane, the issues and battles that we had to go through there with the budget shortfalls, and then having the ability to create some programs in agriculture and forestry for economic development, building a global infrastructure for increasing amount of exports of ag and forestry products, and then building out that infrastructure under Governor McAuliffe, and then spending basically the last almost 2 years as Secretary of Commerce and Trade, broadening the portfolio and working with a large selection of business and industry, recruiting new business and industry into the state, but also working with existing business and industry to help them expand. It has just been an incredible experience, and one that I'll be forever grateful to the three governors who I've worked for and the citizens of the Commonwealth for giving me the opportunity.
You know what, your comment about helping existing businesses to expand, that's sometimes doesn't make the same headlines as something new coming into the Commonwealth, but it's got to be something that's very important.
It's very important. Somewhere between 65 and 70% of all new jobs created in the Commonwealth each year are created by existing business and industry expanding, and you're right. Far too often, they just don't get the attention that they deserve. It's almost, we're in the Christmas holiday season. Everybody wants to show off the new toy, play with the new toy, and when you get business and industry from another state or another country, that's the shiny new toy everybody's talking about, everybody's looking at. But the backbone of the economy, those jobs that just keep being created over and over and over, by and large are from existing business and industry, growing, expanding, and reinvesting. And that's been something that I've really wanted to focus in on, because I know from my time in the private sector, when I was with Universal Leaf Tobacco and Diamond, most of the things that we did were expansions of existing operations, not only here in America, but in some places around the world. So having that personal experience in the private sector and then coming into state government and recognizing that, you know, really 65–70% of the jobs being created are from existing business and industry, I knew we needed to pay more attention and put a bigger spotlight on it. I know Governor McAuliffe has felt the same way, and really over the last 2+ years, we've really increased the focus there. And I think that the next Governor-elect Northam, and his Secretary of Commerce and Trade, his Secretary of Agriculture and Forestry should do the exact same thing.
You know, it's more than just a rumor. In fact, I think someone could find archived one of our previous shows that when you were meeting with Governor McDonnell, that you had a list of things that should happen in the next person who would be succeeding you.
Yeah.
And then the governor said he liked the list and he wanted you to do it. I know that you've made your decision that you're not going to be staying on, and I know you've had conversation with the governor-elect.
Yes.
So I'm not asking for any proprietary information.
Right.
But what would be on your list of recommendations for, not simply say for your successor, but for the Commonwealth? What is it that you would say, now keep on doing this and keep on doing this, and here's something else that you should be doing? So, well,
and I have really been talking about that and privately with the governor-elect and some of his teammates, the transition and incoming people, and I was publicly at the Virginia Chamber of Commerce annual meeting a few weeks ago, last week with the Virginia Economic Developers Association. I've really been focusing in on that. You know, the biggest thing that we're talking about for the future is workforce development. Workforce development is our greatest asset, but it's also one of our greatest challenges. We have got to be working with the private sector better than we're doing today on helping to create, having the students, the human talent that are going ready into the workforce for these 21st century jobs, whether they're in bio, advanced manufacturing, cybersecurity, the list goes on and on. We have to do a better job, and we are. There have been some major reforms in workforce development, bipartisan reforms, Governor McAuliffe working with people like Frank Ruff and Kathy Byron in the General Assembly. So major reforms going through, but we got to continue. And as I said earlier, it's our greatest asset, it's also our greatest challenge. The best thing that we have going for us is that it's basically a challenge for all of the other 49 other states. I also think that site readiness, we don't have enough business-ready sites in Virginia for big projects. We've lost more than 50 projects over the last decade, coming in somewhere between $6 and $7 billion in capital investment lost. And it's because we didn't have the sites that were ready to move in tandem with business. We always talk about moving at the speed of business. Virginia does a great job of that. Unfortunately, when it comes to site readiness, that's a major challenge for us, because we know the numbers and the projects speak for themselves that we've lost, and with all those investments in those projects are lost job opportunities for our citizens. So I would also mention Go Virginia. The concept of regional collaboration, counties, cities across a broad spectrum working together to create new opportunities for good paying jobs. I grew up in Danville, Pennsylvania County during a time when the localities were fighting with each other about annexation. They fought so much that they didn't see the collapse of the tobacco industry, the furniture industry, the textile industry, and even when it was collapsing, they were too busy arguing about what had taken place in the past to really look forward. Now they work together very well. In fact, when I go to Danville for economic development meetings, Pennsylvania County officials are in the room, and when I go to Chatham for meetings, Danville officials are in the room. So we need to do more regional cooperation, and I think Go Virginia is one of the catalysts for that. I could go on, but those are site readiness, workforce development, regional collaborations, or better regional collaborations across a greater spectrum of the state are three things I think that we really do need to focus on. You could talk about regulatory reform, you could talk about tax reform, you could talk about a myriad of other issues, but I think
lower on the list.
Yeah, there's more, but those are three really big pressing issues for us.
So let's go back to workforce development. You've been in the private sector. My hunch is you'll be back in the private sector in some way, and we'll be finding out about that in the future. What does the private sector need to be doing on workforce development, what's its challenges, and what working with government? I mean, government can't do it all.
Right, right. No, I agree. And private sector has a major, major role to play, working closer with the state, working closer with our schools, whether it's K-12, with our colleges and universities, particularly our community colleges. There's a study that the governor talks about a great deal that says over the course of the next decade, of the 1.5 million jobs that Virginians will need through new additions and retirements, more than 60% of those will not need a 4-year college degree. So you're talking about a great, great opportunity for our community colleges to step up. And that's where you can really see a lot more partnerships with business and industry, working directly with community colleges to create a pipeline of human talent, the business saying, these are the jobs that we need for the 21st century. These are the jobs that we need to fulfill demand of what we believe we see not only today, tomorrow, but well into the future. And I think that we're doing a better job of that. The governor's very proud of talking about how cyber issues are now being discussed as in kindergarten and getting kids to think about those type of opportunities. STEM-H obviously is a big piece of going forward. So I think there's business and industry can step up further and work with government, but we have to create the platforms. We have to make it business friendly for the government and the business sector to work together to help create those jobs. And again, we're blessed. I feel like I'm talking about a bad situation. It's not bad. It can be better. Because when you're at 3.6 unemployment like we are, the second lowest unemployment rate of any major state in America, we're doing really well. But can we do better? Yes. And in workforce, I think we can. And that is a collaborative effort with government and the private sector.
What do you see in the workforce that would be of retooling, retraining, or second or third or fourth careers for people? Because not that everything you were saying fit in the mold of ones coming out of high school, but there's a significant part of the workforce that fortunately may be employed right now.
Right. Yeah, there's opportunities there. I mean, to think about, retraining and getting credentials, having more opportunities for apprenticeships. Those are the type of things I'm talking about where you probably don't need, if you're changing careers in your mid-50s or earlier, you don't need to go back and do a 4-year, or maybe not even do a 2-year local, community college degree. That's maybe 6 months to a year or less that you can work on those opportunities. And I think it's just with the K-12 reforms that we've had, it really can start there. Because I remember growing up in Danville, Pennsylvania County, in the discussions I had with guidance counselors, it was never about thinking about the jobs or opportunities of when I graduated in 1987. I don't ever remember anybody talking to me about the jobs of the 1990s or beyond. It was always about, what do you want, where do you want to go to school, and what do you want to major in? That needs to change, and I think it has changed. I hear stories all the time about the discussions that are going on, in some cases starting at kindergarten with children, but as they get older, I mean, really in grade school, thinking about the new opportunities that are 5, 10, 20 years out. And we can't predict the future, but certainly with all the opportunities that are out there in health, bio, cyber, IT, advanced manufacturing, those things are going to continue to evolve and be opportunities for the state. So I think it's a combination of a lot of things going on there, but certainly retraining as you're changing careers, you don't need to have a 2-year or 4-year degree to be retrained. It can be a lot shorter time period. And again, that's where business working with local governments and community colleges can really make a difference.
I had a conversation just recently with one of my daughters who teaches at VCU in the teacher education program. And I'm sure on Governor McAuliffe and Governor-elect Northam's list, it's a number of retirements that are going to come in among teachers and the vacancies. I mean, there are school divisions. Right now, we're having a conversation in December that have a tremendous number of still vacancies where they're using substitutes.
Right.
And I think that certainly working with in the workforce that's out there, there's certainly a need for making sure that probably second career or third career people are taking their time in the classroom as a teacher.
Exactly. Well, the governor's announcing some budget initiatives today as we speak, as a matter of fact, on filling those gaps and teacher shortages around the state. And you're right, maybe working with teachers who've retired to get them back in where they can keep their full state benefits without forfeiting any retirements. Like you said, also maybe people that are, have the opportunity with a little bit of extra studies or credentialing that could come in.
Right.
We do need it. I mean, teachers are. I think back on my time in growing up in Danville and Pennsylvania County, the professors I had at the University of Richmond, the business school professors I had at VCU getting in the MBA, they made fundamental differences in my life.
Right.
And to think about school systems around the state, I was very fortunate, again, blessed to have the upbringing that I've had and the education that I've had, but you recognize there are a lot of places in the state that could use assistance in those teacher shortages. And some cases are in affluent areas like Central Virginia, the Greater Richmond.
That's right.
So it's something that I know that Governor McAuliffe, I'm sure Governor-elect Northam, the General Assembly, Secretary Trent right now in education, whoever the next Secretary of Education may be, Secretary Trent or someone else, I know it's going to be a very, very top priority for them.
And I will let our viewers know that we're having the conversation on December 11th. And so as they're watching it perhaps on Christmas Eve
right.
or sometime during that week in other markets, they probably will have heard about these announcements that you said that the governor would be making. Okay, let's go to the second one. You said site readiness. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things I hear, particularly from jurisdictions that maybe don't have mega sites, is there a site readiness part that fits for smaller numbers of, for someone who would come in with a small number of employees, and because I think I get a hunch that the mega sites, people know about those major.
Yeah, we have a program that's run out of the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. That's the Virginia Business Ready Sites program, and it's state money that works with localities to help build out the infrastructure to have business-ready sites.
Right.
And last year, the Virginia Economic Developers Association, the Chamber, and a few others worked with the General Assembly and the McAuliffe administration to lower the acreage. So it didn't have to be these huge mega parks, that they can be smaller ones where 100 acres might suffice versus 500 or 1,000 acres or something, again, you and I would probably consider mega. But yeah, those are the type programs. I think I hope that in the governor's outgoing budget, you'll see some new money going into to that program, but also recognizing that localities will have to step up and do more because all the dollars are not going to come out of the state. And I think there's another opportunity for Go Virginia and these regional collaborations. Again, who's to say that, again, go back to where I'm from, where Danville, Pennsylvania County couldn't work closely with Martinsville and Henry County, or Halifax County and South Boston on shared locations. And you could go around the state where regional collaboration, Richmond and Chesterfield, Richmond and Henrico, the possibilities are limitless. But those are the things that are going to have to happen, because if we pride ourselves on moving at the speed of business, and we know that we're not moving at the speed of business when it comes to site readiness, that should be right at the top of the list as far as what economic development needs to be doing. Local economic developers working with regional economic developers and the state at VEDP. So important issue. One that there's some sites that are coming online. There's a site just outside of Danville, the Berry Hill site, that is one of the largest on the entire East Coast. Chesterfield's working on a site just south of here that will be hopefully ready in a few years. That, again, you could go around the state and mention many others, but they're not there yet. And that's cost us. We had a large company, large corporation, international corporation, tell us a few weeks ago that Virginia had been eliminated. They were looking at 3 large sites, and they eliminated Virginia from contention because the sites weren't ready. We were not able to move at the same speed as that business. Lost capital, lost tax dollars, lost jobs. So we know that people are paying attention and hopefully going to do more in the future.
All right, moving at the speed of business. I was at the Chamber event, heard you speak and others speak, and I heard a business owner from Newport News talk about the time that it took to open a new facility in Newport News in his company. They do business in other states, and my recollection was it took 2 or 3 times as long to go through some regulatory hoops. While that was lower, didn't make the top 3 on your list.
Right.
What are you seeing that the Commonwealth needs to be doing, and maybe localities in addition to the Commonwealth, with regards to, I mean, regulations are important. We can argue that back and forth.
Absolutely.
But if they move so slowly, then, I mean, his business started in Newport News,
Right.
well-known name in Newport News.
Right.
He's continuing there, so he took the time. But someone who didn't have to stay in the Commonwealth might have
Right.
said, I'll go somewhere else.
Right. Yeah, and then after that roundtable was over with, I had another businessman come up to me talking about a similar instance in the Virginia Beach area of where his was trying to do an expansion. I think on the whole, David, Virginia does a really good job. There's always examples where things get slowed down, and when you start talking about multiple years, it really frustrates me.
Right.
I know it frustrates Governor McAuliffe. I know it frustrates local economic developers. Those are outliers. On the whole, the state, working in tandem with our localities, with our regions, do a really good job of moving the process along. I hate to say it, but sometimes the federal government plays a role. In fact, I'm working with Secretary Natural Resources Molly Ward now on an issue nearby here that's held up by a little bit of slowness from the federal government. So again, on the whole, we do a good job. Can we do better? Yes. And then sometimes the slowdown is beyond our control, and that's where it's important for us to have good relationships with the federal government to help facilitate the movement of the process. But I would say, again, the examples that were given that day in Williamsburg for the chamber event are the exceptions, not the rules. But at the same time, as someone who's worked on business expansion in the private sector and the public sector, I know how frustrating it can be, and that's where it's very, very important for those business and industry who are growing, expanding, to work as closely as they can with their local, regional, and state government partners to move the process along.
Before our time's up, say a bit more about Go Virginia, because hopefully our viewers know about Go Virginia, but there may be some that are saying, what is this? And if they're involved with it, they certainly know
Right.
about it.
Well, Go Virginia was created in the last General Assembly session, where it's instead of having a carrot and a stick, it's really a lot of carrots to try to facilitate localities to work together for more regional collaboration. And again, there's no stick involved, it's only carrots. So if the regions and the localities within those regions come up with plans to figure out ways to build out a better infrastructure, to draw new business and industry in, to create those higher paying jobs that we want all across the Commonwealth, whether it's here in the Richmond area, Southwest Virginia, the Eastern Shore, Northern Virginia, Shenandoah Valley, South Side, wherever, we all want that. So it's just getting off the platform, as they say. It's a great idea, great concept. Getting to reality takes time. In fact, there's a vote tomorrow by the Go Virginia, the statewide board, on signing off on some of the projects where you'll start to see the faucet, the capital,
Excellent.
coming in. So by the time the show airs, we will know of some of the projects that have been signed off on. But really what it does, it comes down to trying to facilitate localities to work together more often in the sake of building out a better infrastructure for the recruitment of new business and industry, helping existing business and industry expand, for higher paying, good jobs all across the state. And it's a very good partner, I think, to what the Virginia Economic Development Partnership is doing. They're out recruiting new business and industry from around the world, around the country, helping existing business and industry. So Go Virginia and that platform, working very closely with VEDP, I think is going to have really some great opportunities for the state going forward. But we're in that process now where just like any other startup operation, whether it's private sector or public, it takes time. And hopefully tomorrow, with the sign off on some of the projects, we'll start seeing the resources flow and some of these conceptual projects starting to become a reality.
The position you're in ends on the 13th of January. Yes. Any announcements yet about where you're going to be?
No, I'm headed back to the private sector. Governor Northam discussed the opportunity of staying on. He's such a great guy, a great friend, but I just felt like it was time, after almost 11 years in state government, something that when Governor Kane asked me to leave the private sector, I thought was going to be a 3-year detour. And here we are almost 11 years later. I've had an incredible time. It is such an honor to work for Governor Kane, Governor McDonnell, and now Governor McAuliffe, from the Department of Agriculture Commissioner role, Secretary of Agriculture and Forestry under both McDonnell and McAuliffe, and then now the incredible opportunity that Governor McAuliffe has given me to be his Secretary of Commerce and Trade, while we're on a glide path to having over $20 billion in capital investment in the state, about 1,100 economic development projects. And it's just been an honor and a privilege to serve those three gentlemen and the citizens of the Commonwealth. but at the same time, you sort of feel like it's time to move out and let somebody else have the office. I do wish Governor-elect Northam all the best. I told him that I was going to be his greatest champion in the private sector. We're going to be working very diligently to bring new business opportunities to the Commonwealth, hopefully help companies move more product in the global marketplace, working with our General Assembly members as well.
Let me interrupt you. You got about 20 more seconds.
Okay.
So look into the camera and tell your children that you're coming home.
I hope to be home a little bit more, Kate, Liza, and Lily, and my wife, Margaret, who have put up with a lot over the last almost 11 years, traveling all around the world and being at the service of the three governors I've worked for. So thanks for bearing with me over the last almost 11 years, and looking forward to all the new opportunities in the future.
Thank you very much.
David, thank you. I appreciate it, as always. Thank you.
Richmond is made possible in part by the Virginia Education Association. An investment in teachers today will pay dividends tomorrow. Dignity Memorial. The Dignity Network provides professional and compassionate funeral, memorial, cremation, and cemetery services throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. Virginia Hospital and Healthcare Association for jobs, the economy, and public health. Virginia Tourism Corporation, promoting why Virginia is for lovers of wine and craft beers, the outdoors, beaches, history, music, and more. Fall in love with Virginia at virginia.org. Additional support provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.